Hello and welcome to World Insight with me, Tian Wei, coming to you live from Beijing on CGTN. Coming up on today's program, Russians will go to the polls on Sunday amid a diplomatic row between Russia and the UK. Would Vladimir Putin's tough engagement with Britain carry him to another term in office? And in tonight's Straight Talk, listen in on conversation with CPPCC member Xu Niansha, who also chairs China's Poly Group, which is a key state-owned enterprises in China. He tells us how his company is breaking with the past to be in step with the nation's rising economy. Let's begin our program today in Russia, where voters are about to elect their next new president. Although there's little doubt among pollsters that current President Vladimir Putin will win the first round, there are always twists and turns before the election. British Prime Minister Theresa May announced on Wednesday that the UK will expel 23 Russian diplomats in response to the attack on a former spy and his daughter on British soil. Could that affect the Russian election?
A landslide victory looking set for Vladimir Putin on the way. Russians will vote on Sunday to elect their president, and opinion polls show Mr. Putin will likely secure another term that will take him to nearly a quarter century in office. He is standing against 7 other candidates, but none are polling more than 8%.
We in Russia have always decided our destiny ourselves and acted in accordance with our conscience, our understanding of truth and justice, our love of the motherland. That's why I ask you to come to the polling stations on Sunday. Use your right to choose a future for the great and beloved Russia.
Diplomatic tensions have overshadowed the Russian election over a double-agent poison attack. Former Russian agent Sergei Skripal and his daughter Yulia were found unconscious on a bench in Britain. The British government believes Russia is behind the military-grade nerve agent attack. France, Germany, and the U.S. all quickly joined the UK in blaming Russia, despite the Kremlin's repeated denials.
The United Kingdom will now expel 23 Russian diplomats who have been identified as undeclared intelligence officers. They have just 1 week to leave.
We believe that the measures which are taken by the British government is nothing to do with the situation that we have in Salisbury. We believe this is real, very serious provocation.
Russia is set to expel British diplomats in retaliation. After the first known offensive use of such weapon in Europe since World War II, it seems a new Cold War is taking place. And the timing just before the Russian election is quite curious. Since Russians give Mr. Putin credit for standing up against Western governments, the outcome of the Sunday election may not be a surprise. But tensions and scandals are water off a duck's back for the Russian leader.
About the UK's diplomatic role with Russia and the Russian election, what now? Let's turn to our panel in Beijing, Cui Hongjian. He is the director of the Department for European Studies, China Institute of International Studies. Also in Bangkok, we are joined by Dr. Nigel Gold-Davis, an Associate Fellow of the Asia Program and the Russia and Eurasia Program at Chatham House. He is also former British Ambassador to Belarus. In Moscow, we are Vyacheslav Matuzov, an independent political analyst and former Russian diplomat, and also in Beijing, we are joined by Iner Tangen, our current affair commentator. Welcome to all of you, gentlemen. I want to begin with Mr. Matuzov. How does Russia, do you think, the election itself, likely to be influenced at all by the diplomatic role with the UK?
Well, in my opinion, that Russia, this year elections have a special meaning, and it's very important for Russian people because Russia proved in its their foreign policy that Russia came out on the international level as a strong and country that want to defend its national interests.
Okay.
I think that Putin enjoyed today a great support inside the Russian Federation because of his foreign policy proved to be very effective for Russia, and that all his actions in Syria, in Ukraine, in other places, and vis-à-vis the United States, even that scandal that was arranged by Great Britain affected on him positively, not negatively.
On him positively. Mr. Gold Davis from the UK, do you agree with that assessment?
I would perhaps rather describe the outcome of Russian foreign policy in recent times, and in particular the outrageous attack in Salisbury on the 4th of March, as producing both an aggressive and increasingly isolated Russia. The emerging conclusion to reach about the initial fallout from this latest horrific use of nerve gas is how isolated Russia has become, and how, despite real recent difficulties and tensions within the Western transatlantic community, how quickly, as you said, other major countries, United States, France, Germany in the first instance, and now most recently the whole of NATO collectively, have expressed their unequivocal solidarity with the UK. It's not just the UK's version of what has happened, it is now widely shared.
All right. Mr. Kangan from the United States. Could this be a consensus in a way that unite the West together, at least on one issue? And by the way, is the purpose of doing this accusation solely because of that?
I don't think so. Quite frankly, I mean, in terms of Russia, I would agree with the first commentator that this is not going to hurt Putin. You have to remember that this was somebody who's considered a traitor. He was tried in absentia. He admitted that he was a double agent for Great Britain. I don't think the Russian people will have any qualms about him going on. From the Western point of view, it's a violation of sovereignty. This is more of the same from the U.S. It's really difficult to know because Donald Trump hasn't come out and said anything directly about this. But many people in the administration, and they've voiced, the administration has formally voiced its support for Great Britain on this thing. So it's very hard. The American foreign policy is in disarray, obviously. Rex Tillerson is out, so it's hard to see exactly where Donald Trump is going to come on this.
But the U.S. did say it's going to enlarge the so-called blacklist against Russia as a result of this incident.
Yes, but I mean, exactly what does that mean? I mean, they've been talking about double secret probation for a long time. They keep saying that they're raising the level of what they're going to do, but it really is just naming a few people or a few companies and things like this. And the effect is not going to be one that's going to be earth-shaking. It's more of an annoyance to the people who are around Putin.
Okay, do you believe so, Mr. Tway?
Yes, I
briefly.
think. Yeah, I think firstly, indeed, a requirement for the truth. But now I think that nobody talk about that, especially from Western countries. So I think it's a very, very big problem. And also we can understand why now from the Russian side there's still very, tough attitude on this issue. Another issue I think that yes, it's a good time maybe for Western countries to show their solidarity again, especially after some big problem among themselves. For example, how about this Mr. Trump's policy on trade and something else. So I think it's good. It's good time for UK firstly to show the solidarity internally, and then it's good for UK and the European Union to show that okay, still even there is a Brexit, but still we are in the same camp. But the third is okay, the Western countries still, especially when Western countries face off Russia, so we are together. Yeah.
All right. It sounds like a simple logic and a simple guess, but Mr. Gold Davis, it's not that simple, it seems, because the UN Security Council has already put it into a discussion, and all countries have expressed their views, and it seems that nobody is very clearly standing on Russia's side so far, given what has been known without much final conclusion of the investigation?
Russia stands alone so far in its version of these events, and what's been particularly surprising about the Security Council debate on this issue is the theory proposed by the Russian permanent representative that Britain itself might have perpetrated this attack on its home soil. I think most people would see that as a version that can be believed by no one. So again, I'd point to the diplomatic consequences of what has to be seen from a Russian perspective as a very significant own goal and not a consequence they will have welcomed.
Briefly from you too, Mr. Gold Davis, do you think this will, in a way, as some of the other panelists suggested, help President Putin to be re-elected, because it seems that there is, very strong conspiracy coming from the West against Russia, at least that's how the story is being told inside Russia, for his re-election, if there is any?
I think that this factor is wholly irrelevant and will play no part whatsoever in the outcome of the balloting on Sunday. And it's not the result that we should be looking at to understand what is going on in Russia. It's the turnout. Watch how many people, what proportion of the Russian population actually turns out to vote. What the Kremlin wants is a 70% vote for Putin on a 70% turnout. They're likely to achieve the first. It's much less clear they will achieve the second, not least because the most effective political opponent of Vladimir Putin, Alexei Navalny, who's not been allowed to stand, is calling for a boycott of the elections. So we'll have to see, against the background of really concerted efforts on the Kremlin side to try to bring out as many people as possible, how effective that call will be.
70%, is that a possibility turnout, Mr. Basuzov?
Well, I think that the idea of isolating Russia in the world, it is very wrong and mistaken idea, because Russia doesn't feel itself isolated. Yes, they cut relations with Russia from the United States and Western countries supporting or collaborating with the United States. But we don't feel that we are isolated. We have broad relations with the Eastern world, in the Eastern country, Islamic world, with China, with India, with BRICS and SHOS community. So I don't feel that Russia is afraid of these steps by the United States. On the contrary, more pressure United States give to Russia, the more it will be concentrating the attention to domestic affairs, to economy, to industry, to agriculture, to develop relations with those who has no aggressive goals in Russian relations with Russia, not demand anything politically, geopolitically. I think that it is wrong approach of Western countries to Russia. Misunderstanding what is going on the ground, that's the main thing that should be changed in the mentality of Western politicians.
Yeah, let's talk about what is going on inside the country. 70% turnout, do you think that's a possibility? You still haven't answered my question, Mr. Mitsutov. Very briefly.
Well, I think that now Putin is enjoying majority of voices to support him. Absolutely. Of course, now, today, he has a very strong rival, the very strong oppositional leader. There's in the world speaking very little about it. It is a representative of Communist Party and the left wing, Mr. Grudinin, who is really winning points in when they are speaking about internal affairs, about economy. And sometimes he is ahead of Mr. Putin for local, domestic affairs. But as a whole, Putin is facing now real pressure from the opposition to change his current policy.
Talking about the current
policy.
policy.
The situation, corruption.
The situation and the corruption.
Policy.
Yes, let's talk about the inside policy. Economy is a big thing.
Corruption, supporting oligarchs, That was a disillusion that Russian people are feeling to the Russian government.
All right.
That should be
so
changed.
all
Absolutely.
are clear
That
at this point that all gentlemen have agreed that the diplomatic spark between Russia and the UK would not have much at all an impact on the result of the election. So let's move on to about the domestic issues. Mr. Cui, economy not necessarily that good, that we all know, if you look at the numbers. And if you look at momentum, the same thing. So how will President Putin, likely to be re-elected, at least promise the public about what he's going to do next, once he is once again in the office?
Yeah. If we look at Mr. Putin's speech or some presentation, we can find out for the next term as president, Mr. Putin took the improving the people's livelihood as a priority. I think it shows so far the domestic economy and the long, sustainable development will be a biggest challenge for Mr. Putin.
Do you see any answer coming from him?
So far, not yet. Some concrete measures or policies will be taken by Mr. Putin so far. But of course, he gives some very, I think, attractive goal for people. For example, he will try to keep a long-term growth for economy, and at the same time, he promised to people that the government will give you more capability to buy some more cars, anything. But now the problem for Russia's economy is, yes, there are very serious sanctions imposed by Western countries, and also there is not a structural problem or challenges for economy internally. So I don't know so far. No any concrete. There are some promises by Mr. Putin, but not yet some concrete measures.
Got it. Mr. Gold Davis, do you think there is any concrete plan coming from the President Putin when he is likely to be re-elected? But at the same time, people heard his promises a few years earlier when he was running for this term's presidency. So will people still support him in his next round of economic agenda?
I fully agree with what the previous speaker just argued. I do not see evidence of a coherent reform plan to tackle the problems, the many problems of structural reform and corruption and low growth that the Russian economy faces and has faced for some time. What I see instead are debates around Mr. Putin and different reform teams proposing different kinds of approach.
Give us an example.
On the one hand, so Alexei Kudrin, the former long-serving finance minister, an extremely impressive and able technical mind, he proposes a significant degree of structural reform, reducing the role of the state in the economy, getting to grips with some of the dysfunctional political and economic practices that have emerged and strengthened in recent years. On the other hand, a much more statist approach sponsored by Sergei Glaziev, who is much more in favor of a state-led approach, less keen on the market, less open to renewed international economic engagement. These are different and incompatible proposals. There have even been arguments between them. Mr. Putin has yet to make a choice that suggests where he lies in his own view of where to go forward.
Okay. Mr. Tengen, do we see any plan coming from Mr. President, the Russian president right now, Mr. Putin, about economic development? We see him talk about the nuclear issues a lot. We see him talk about the Syria issue a lot. We see him talk about the Winter Olympic Games a lot. Russian athletes are being boycotted. Has he been given some concrete plans for economic development?
No, and unfortunately, he's playing the nationalist card because he doesn't have an economic card. The fact is that the economics of that country depend a lot on the natural resource prices that are going forward. With a potential trade war in the offing, this could be disastrous for them. They were expecting a pickup. They've been having a lackluster economy. So much of it is going to depend on that. So he's going to have to wait and see. He's going to continue to concentrate on the nationalist card to keep the country together.
Right. Mr. Besuzov, how can he turn the fate, into a new term, to a new page, be able to work on the economic issues? What could be this entry point for him?
My private opinion that Mr. Putin didn't open his intention in economical, social life in Russia. He was concentrating in his words previously on international issues. And his economical, social program is unclear for Russian people. I think that now we, as a Russian, waiting from him real steps for reforming Russian economy fully, to refuse from liberal economy suggested previous decades by Kudrin, by others who are pushing Russia to free private economy that proved to be not effective.
Right.
They ruined our industry. They ruined our agriculture. Now what is demanded from Putin for his program to change the situation. He didn't open yet his cards.
Not
but
yet.
Opponents who I mentioned, they came out with their economical, social program, concrete measures. Sergei Glaziev and many, many others who suggested new approach to the situation inside the country.
I see.
But for this purpose, it should be regarded his relations with oligarchs who are supporting him, who are now under fire of the Western American and British and European persecution.
Got it. So, Mr. Cui, we got to see what the President of Russia has in mind. He has some plans, for example, Eurasian corridor. China has the Belt and Road Initiative. Apparently, there are things that the two can work together. But of course, one corridor would not be able to help the Russian economy from inside out. The question is whether he has the real remedy. If there are real remedy, what do you think could be of those? Particularly, Mr. Matuzov from Russia originally said it very clearly. The so-called 100% free market economy at the very beginning of the so-called reform in Russia was not successful. People were devastated. People remember that very clearly. So with that experience in mind, that memories in mind, what could be his card?
Yeah, I think that now the problem or challenges for Russian economy, or maybe for the next term for Mr. Putin, is how could he try to take some more time, especially just like he mentioned that he will try to defend the interests of Russia. I think the main purpose for him is to take some more time for the so-called reform. Yeah, by the time for reform.
What kind of reform?
What kind of course, firstly, to do something, especially the economic structure in Russia, to change, the traditional, yes, from to a comprehensive one. So that's also the reason why now there is a more and more requirement from the Russian side to get some more cooperation with China, because as we know, China is an economy with a very comprehensive, structure. So we can, yes, recent years we can find more and more trade between China and Russia, and also perhaps in future more cooperation on the infrastructure between two countries. I think to some degree, in the long term, it will be helpful for this reform of economic structure in Russia.
Mr. Go Davis, how helpful is it that Russia developing closer ties with China, economically speaking, and trade-wise? But to what extent Russia has to come up with its own remedy, not just building relations with China?
I think it does. I think that's absolutely right. A constructive set of foreign economic relations in an increasingly still globalized world is a part of a solution to any question of economic development. But really, more important than that still is what the domestic reform agenda is in any country, including Russia, and how a country manages its set of external economic relations and harnesses them to its own goals. So it's certainly not enough. We've seen, of course, this concerted tilt, particularly after 2014, the imposition of Western sanctions in the wake of the annexation of Crimea. Russia imposing its own sanctions on itself, in effect, in response to that by banning Western food imports and turning in turn to Asia in a more concerted way than we've seen before. And now we see as a consequence the Sino-Russian relationship warmer and more productive than any time pretty much in living memory. Yet I think it would be unwise for a country as large as Russia in particular to rely on that. There is no substitute for a concerted, thought-through economic development strategy. And again, I don't think that any of us on this program this evening really see that.
Right. Mr. Tangen, we heard from the Chinese foreign minister when he was giving his annual press conference just a few days ago. He talked about there's always room for improvement between China and Russia when it comes to bilateral relations, as long as the imagination could go. That's, of course, very complicated, complimentary words coming from the Chinese side. But having said that, though, Russians know very well that their economic future cannot just rely on relationship with one country. So where is the entry point? That is the issue, isn't it? The entry point, where is it?
Well, you keep asking that, and unfortunately, none of us can give you the answer to that. I mean, they're trying very, very hard to figure it out. But the reason that Putin hasn't laid his cards on the table is he really doesn't have them. As I keep saying, he's at the mercy of commodity prices. If energy, you'll note within the last few days, Russia signed a huge deal, natural gas deal with China. China is in the market for it. This is good for both countries. And the Western pressure is forcing him more to things. He's very pragmatic. He's basically rolling with it and doing what is necessary to maintain his strategic direction, play the nationalist card, and then bide his time on the economics.
Mr. Matsuzov, the entry point.
Well, I think that the main feature of current events and current policy of Russian Federation is that Russia came out on the world arena as an independent from American influence. That was the Russian problem begins and Russian problems ended. Because ended the idea of our dependence on natural resources, gas, oil, and at that time, several decades, we were supported by this export oil, export gas, and many other resources. Today, it was when we faces counter-actions from United States in Syria, in Ukraine, in Europe, and in other places, we can conclude that it should be necessary today, not yesterday, to concentrate Russian government attention for economical, internal political, and social issues. To be Russia more strong and independent, not only on in the foreign policy, but only based this foreign policy a strong economy. We see that our way not cut relations with the West, but we develop relations with China, with India, with Shanghai organizations, and with BRICS.
All right, we're running out of time, but thank you so much for your thoughts. Vladimir Matsuzov and also Nigel Gold-Davis, Einar Tangen, and Cui Hongjian. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for being with us. You're watching World Insight with me, Tian Wei, coming up on our program. CPPCC member Xu Niansha knows what he's talking about in steering China's Poly Group to its current shape and size. That's one of the key state-owned enterprises of China. He tells us why breaking with the past is important for enterprises to grow in tonight's Straight Talk right after this break. The shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line.
If we move together, we can have a dance.
Straight into the eyes.
Poverty alleviation achievement in China is unprecedented.
To me, it's a responsibility.
Straightforward and straight into the new era.
To know more and to sense more.
Straight Talk with Tian Wei from the 2 sessions. So let's go to the Straight Talk on World Insight with me, Tian Wei. Let's boast the name and the style of our exclusive interview series featuring big names coming from all walks of life in China. A person, a talk, a day during the ongoing political season. Today, let's meet Xu Niansha, a CPPCC member and also the chairman of China's Poly Group, that is one of the key state-owned enterprises in China. This year marks the 40 years anniversary of China's reform and opening up, and a part of the ongoing effort is to deepen reforms among state-owned enterprises. The Poly Group is a good example of a growing Chinese enterprise after doing quite well in the global market. In 1992, the company started as a small company dealing with arms, but it has expanded its businesses in more than 100 cities worldwide through trade, real estate, and cultural cooperation. Xu Niansha shared his thoughts on how his organization is taking the lead to transform its business practices to grow with China's economy.
From an arms dealer to now a global conglomerate. How did it happen?
When the people call us the arm dealers, so I want to correct them. So our business is defense equipment.
Okay, there we go.
Okay,
right.
Whatever. You know, the police established is the Chinese, the PLA still want to the modernizations. They need to change the equipment. That's the reason. So they established the Poly company. It's easy for the through the Poly the company to contact with the Western countries.
You imported Black Hawks, Russian jets as well. Quite advanced equipment then.
The police have some the role.
But since then you have changed.
Changed a lot. That time is our 100% the business. Now it's only our 3% the business is equipment, the defense equipment.
I see. So you got real estate.
Okay.
You got investment. You also have arts and culture. Which among the three is the most important to you?
From the size, we can say the real estate business is more the contribution to the whole companies.
But Poly started as a real estate developer.
Yes, it's our the main business.
And you're going to continue that path for a long time?
We have the long histories. I think that almost more than 10 years, the real estate business. In the future, still is our business, but the culture business still is very important.
Tell me more about it.
Our three sectors. The first is the auction, the artworks dealing. The second is the performance. The third one is the film or movie business. Okay.
You got a big smile on your face when you're talking about your arts and culture sector. Obviously, you have shown your attitude.
Every year we organize 8,000 performance. Some of we outside China, some of the introduced from the foreign countries. So you know the people enjoy the performance, even in the foreign countries. The auction house, it ranked as number 3rd in the whole world. So we're still very proud of it.
You are very proud.
Yes, even our movie sector, so it's small, but we have the more chance to communicate with Hollywood, the very famous directors, even the movie stars.
You met some of them?
Yes.
Did you enjoy it?
It's my job. I just want to do the business, and almost no chance to enjoy. So just discuss what kind of areas we can cooperate, or give us some advising or suggestions, what they want in China, or what they need the Chinese company to involve with the business.
But Mr. Xu, I think you are enjoying yourself. I mean, over the decades, think about it, Mr. Xu. You started as a soldier in the Navy, and then reform opening up, you jumped into the sea of business, literally. And now you become almost, quote, a captain of a global conglomerate. So it seems that you are enjoying yourself.
Now we are ranked in the 341st top 500 Fortune. So, but I don't think some big change.
Really?
Yes, I don't think it's a jump.
Why not?
When I was in the Navy, I was the captain from the boat and the frigate vessel. Now, Poly, it is almost like the aircraft carrier, the fleet. So, I am the commander.
I like that analogy, Mr. Xu.
So, no difference. Try to do my best with principles. During the spring, the holidays, the 6 days, the holidays, I read the book, the principles.
Ray Dalio's
yes,
book,
Ray
the
Dalio's
latest one, the hot one.
Yeah, sure.
So actually he's talking about a decision-making process in which you only wait for the best idea to come and you only implement the best idea. Is that how you do things?
Try to do the best. Ray Dalio call it idea meritocracy.
Now China is trying to restructuring its economy, supply side restructuring of this economy. How has Poly Group been doing according to it?
So for the state-owned company, we have to obey the state, the order, and the plan. Give you an example, we quit from the coal business. So we transfer a company who owned 27 billion Chinese yuan assets. We transfer the assets to another company freely.
Oh my God, so you just quit?
Yes.
27 billion RMB
yes.
going to a totally different company.
Sure.
It hurts.
Of course, it's pain. It's painful. The employees, they have the very strong feelings, connections with the Poly. Yeah. But it is the responsibility. So we should do that.
Belt and Road Initiative. How can you do your best? I mean, it's a great idea, Mr. Xu. I know you and your organization is also working on it. But think about that. You want to make sure your investment projects are going to be commercially viable, not just now, but in the long term. Can they be done?
We have the investment, the committee. They make the decision.
So every time they make the decision?
Every time they make the decisions. And they give the suggestions to the general manager. And the general manager, so they pass the general manager meeting, send the decisions to the board. So we're still voting. I only have the one vote.
This year, Mr. Xu, marks 40 years of reform opening up in China. I mean, look at Poly Group. That's a product of reform opening up. You yourself as well. So if I ask you, Mr. Xu, what are some of the most important parts of the experiences and takeaways we should have about reforms and opening up over the past 40 years that would help us to make progress for the future? What would you say?
Without the Chinese Communist Party, or without Deng Xiaoping, without Xi Jinping, like the kind of the leader of our party, we cannot imagine the open policy. We cannot imagine the modernizations. So we can overcome so many the barriers and the difficulties, the situations. So I think it's the first. The second one, liberalize the production force. So you can compare China with the developing countries.
Chinese are always very hardworking.
Yes, very hardworking.
They have a lot of dreams too.
Too many dreams. Very nice dreams. So even our staff, the employee in the Poly, the China dream and the Poly dream and the personal dream.
And you have the responsibility, probably, Mr. Xu, to help fulfill those dreams.
Yes, I have my responsibility. I try to do my best.
That's Xu Niansha, a CPPCC member and chairman of the Poly Group. That is one of the key state-owned enterprises in China, talking about how his company has been transformed itself to fit into the time. And that is all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more, try to find us World Insight CGTN into your search engine or check out our YouTube channel. You can also follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Sina Weibo. From me, Tian Wei, and everyone on the World Insight team, thanks for watching, and tune in again next time for insights across China and around the world. The weekend is up, so enjoy a good one, everyone.